The storm came fast, swallowing the last shred of twilight with howling winds and a darkness that didn't feel natural. It clawed through the trees like a beast released from the mountains. Elena Monroe gripped the steering wheel of her beat-up SUV harder, knuckles white, her breath fogging the windshield despite the busted heater blasting hot air. "Not tonight. Please, not tonight," she whispered, eyes flicking to the gas gauge. Nearly empty, the wipers screeched against sleet-coated glass as the vehicle shuddered over the narrow dirt road leading into the outskirts of Black Hollow, a town she had no business returning to. But when she'd found the letter in her mother's safety box, written years before her death, everything changed. "Find your father in Black Hollow. He's not what you think." A bolt of lightning cracked the sky, illuminating a shape on the road ahead. Elena slammed the brakes, the SUV fishtailed, skidding on gravel and wet pine needles before lurching to a stop. Heart pounding, Elena blinked hard at the figure. At first, she thought it was an animal, massive, dark, and unmoving. But then it shifted. A man. He staggered into the high beams and collapsed. Shit, Elena bolted out of the car, the cold immediately biting through her coat. Rain slashed at her face as she stumbled toward the man. He was shirtless, barefoot. Blood streamed down his chest, his skin covered in gashes and mud, eyes closed tight like he was fighting something behind them. His body was built like a statue, carved from shadow and fury, every inch muscular, wounded, trembling with something that wasn't entirely human. "Hey, can you hear me?" No response. His skin burned under her touch, feverish. But the strangest thing was the way her body reacted. Her pulse surged not from fear, but from something deeper, like a whisper in her blood, a pull. She shook her head. "No time for that." Elena grabbed his arm, surprised by how heavy he was. She dragged him with every ounce of strength she had toward the SUV, rainwater soaking her jeans, adrenaline overriding every sensible thought. Once she managed to hoist him into the passenger seat, she slammed the door shut, slid behind the wheel, and prayed the engine would start. It did. Barely. As the vehicle lurched forward, she glanced at him. He looked young, maybe late 20s, but something ancient lingered in the bruises lining his jaw, in the creases at the edge of his mouth, a presence far too intense for any stranger. Then he spoke, barely a whisper. "Run." Elena stiffened. "What?" His eyes fluttered open. "Golden. Not brown. Not hazel. Gold." She gasped. "You need to run," he said, voice raw and low. "They're coming." 10 minutes later, the SUV coughed its last breath in front of the only safe place she could think of, her uncle's abandoned hunting cabin. Deep in the Hollow's northern woods, Elena yanked the man's arm over her shoulder and helped him inside. The cabin smelled of dust and old whiskey, but it had running water and a wood stove. It would have to do. She lit the fire fast, draped a blanket over him, and finally took a breath. What the hell had she just gotten into? "You saved me," he said hoarsely, eyes fixed on her like she wasn't real. Elena knelt beside him. "You were lying in the road. You're lucky I didn't hit you." A flicker of pain crossed his features. "You shouldn't be here. You said someone's coming." He clenched his jaw. "Not someone. Something. I didn't mean for you to get dragged into this." Elena bristled. "Dragged into what? Exactly?" He didn't answer. Instead, he closed his eyes and shifted as if every breath was a war. The gold in his irises faded into something more human. But it was too late. Elena had seen, whatever he was. He wasn't normal, and deep down, something inside her recognized that, like her mother's letter had awoken something in her, and this stranger, the man with the bleeding chest and golden eyes, was part of it. She reached for the first aid kit, but he stopped her with a hand on her wrist. "You don't want to touch me. It's not safe. You're injured," she said. "And you're not in any shape to fight me on that." A silence stretched between them, filled only by the crackle of fire and the growing weight of what neither dared to say. "What's your name?" she asked softly. He looked at her then, really looked like he was reading a truth buried beneath her skin. "Ronan." The name struck a strange chord in her chest. Familiar, though she swore she'd never heard it before. She swallowed hard. "Elena?" He nodded once, then added, almost reluctantly, "I'm sorry, Elena, but your life, it just changed forever." Outside, a howl split the night, and the storm was only beginning. Elena barely slept that night. The wind screamed against the cabin walls like it was searching for a way in, and the strange man Ronan remained on the edge of consciousness, drenched in fever and shadows. He muttered things she couldn't understand, some in English, some not. A language older than the storm outside. At one point, his body convulsed, and she thought she saw his eyes flash gold again before fading. It wasn't until dawn that silence finally settled. She made coffee out of habit, her hands trembling. The smell didn't soothe her. Nothing did. When she turned back toward the couch where he lay, Ronan was sitting up bare-chested, still bruised, but suddenly alert. The golden hue was gone from his eyes, but his presence filled the cabin like a second fire. "You should have left me," he said quietly, watching her like a predator assessing threat and mercy in the same breath. Elena's hand tightened on the coffee mug. "That's a hell of a thank you. I didn't mean it like that." He exhaled and winced, pressing his hand to his side. "I meant, I don't know how to keep you safe now." She raised a brow. "From what?" He didn't answer, just stood slowly, shoulders tense, like every movement required calculation. "That wound needs stitching," she said, nodding to the gash on his abdomen. "Unless you've got some magical healing trick I don't know about." Ronan looked at her, unreadable. "It'll heal on its own, Elena." She crossed her arms. "You're bleeding all over my uncle's floor." His expression shifted. "You're from Black Hollow?" "I used to be." Her voice hardened. "I left. For a reason." "Then why come back?" She looked away, suddenly feeling exposed. "That's none of your business." He studied her in silence for a long moment, then nodded. "Fair enough." There was something strangely familiar about the way he moved, like he was used to being hunted but never caught. And yet, standing here in her cabin, dripping with tension and mystery, he seemed at home. "I'll be out of your way soon," he said, reaching for his torn shirt and failing to hide a wince. "Right. Because injured, half-naked guys just wander through the woods and leave after a blizzard like it's nothing." Ronan's jaw twitched. "I shouldn't have crossed paths with you, but you did." He turned to her fully then, and something in the air shifted. "Like gravity. Like fate, Elena," he said softly, as though tasting the weight of her name again. "I didn't recognize it last night, but I know now." "You smell like—" "Don't finish that sentence," she warned. His eyes narrowed. "You've been around shifters before." She flinched, the word cutting through her like a blade. Shifters. She hadn't heard that word since she was a child, spoken in whispers, in half memories of moonlight and fear. She'd chalked it up to stories, to the town's way of giving life to its myths. But now she wasn't so sure. "I don't know what you're talking about," she lied, backing toward the fireplace. Ronan stepped forward slowly, deliberately. "Yes, you do. You've felt it too, haven't you? Since I came near you." The pull. She swallowed hard. "I thought it was adrenaline." "It's not." "Then what is it?" He didn't answer. Instead, he looked down, hands still clutching his side. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he said, quieter now. "I was being hunted by another pack. I was trying to lead them away. I didn't realize there was still a human living out here." Let alone he cut himself off. Let alone what? But he wouldn't say. He was hiding something, and not well. Elena turned to grab her jacket from the hook, anger bubbling beneath her skin. "Well, Ronan, as much fun as it is being dragged into your bloody werewolf chase." His head snapped up. "You believe it?" She froze. Her voice came out hollow. "What?" "You said it. Werewolf. You believe." "I believe in what I saw," she snapped. "And your eyes? They weren't human." Silence fell between them, thick and weighted. He sighed and walked to the window, staring out at the forest, where a light snowfall had begun to drift down through the trees. "They'll be back soon. The others. I can't stay here. I'm putting you in danger." "And what happens if you leave?" she asked, voice shaking. "You bleed out in a snowbank? I find your frozen corpse tomorrow?" He didn't answer, but she noticed the faintest curve of his mouth, something close to a smirk. Or maybe gratitude. Then, for the first time since the storm began, he looked human. "If you're determined to help me," he said finally, "then you need to know the truth. About me. About this place. About what you really are." Her blood ran cold. "What I am?" He met her gaze with steady, haunted eyes. "You think you're just passing through. But you've already been claimed by this forest. Whether you remember or not." A gust of wind slammed into the cabin door just then, rattling it in its frame. Outside, distant howls rose again, this time closer. Ronan stepped forward between her and the sound, protective without hesitation. "Stay inside. Don't open the door for anyone but me." "And if it's not you?" she asked, fear blooming in her throat. "Then pray the lock holds." The silence after Ronan's warning lingered like a second shadow. Elena watched him pace the cabin like a caged animal, muscles tense, every movement calculated as though he expected the door to burst open any moment. His senses were clearly heightened. He paused often, tilting his head slightly toward sounds she couldn't hear, like wind shifting in the trees or some low growl in the distance. "How long have you been in Black Hollow?" she asked finally. He turned to her, eyes narrowed. "Why?" "Because you act like you know this place better." "Then I do. I do. I grew up here," she shot back, crossing her arms. "I knew these woods like the back of my hand before I left. And I don't remember golden-eyed men bleeding on back roads or packs hunting anything but deer." Ronan leaned against the wooden beam in the corner, arms crossed now too. "That's because your kind isn't supposed to see us." "My kind?" she repeated, heat rising in her chest. "You say that like I'm some outsider, like you're not the one who crashed into my life." "You saved me," he said, voice low. "And now you're asking questions you're not ready to hear the answers to." Her pulse jumped. "Try me." For a moment, he seemed to weigh something in his mind, maybe whether she was strong enough to handle the truth or foolish enough to keep pushing for it. Then he spoke, voice stripped of pretense. "Black Hollow isn't just a town. It's a border between two worlds. Your kind humans live on one side, mine on the other." "You're really serious," she said quietly. "I'm a shifter, Elena," he said, stepping closer, not to intimidate her but to ensure every word landed. "And I'm not the only one." She didn't move. Her heart thundered, but she stood her ground. "I don't know what that means," she whispered. "It means I can change. Not like fairy tale wolves under a full moon. Not some curse. It's blood, legacy, pack, and the forest. It belongs to us." "Us?" He paused. "Used to anyway." She caught the flicker of emotion in his expression. "Pain, maybe regret. And those howls last night?" she asked. "The ones getting closer? They were searching. For me. And maybe now for you." A chill slid down her spine. She looked toward the frosted window, feeling the forest pressing in like it was listening. "So what happens now?" she asked. "They just come for you? You fight it out like some wild dog war?" He didn't smile. "They're not interested in fair fights." The floor creaked as he shifted weight, and Elena noticed again how effortlessly strong he looked, like the forest had carved him out of rock and put fire in his blood. But something else caught her attention, to a mark, faint and silvered, like an old scar curving over his right shoulder, a sigil. She moved instinctively closer. "What's that?" she asked. "On your shoulder?" Ronan tensed. For a heartbeat, he looked like he might bolt. "It's nothing." "No," she said, her voice softer now. "It's something. I saw it glow last night when you were unconscious. Like it burned through your skin." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked away, jaw flexing. "It's a bond, an alpha's mark." "Wait," she said, piecing the words together. "You're an alpha?" He nodded once reluctantly. Then, "Why are you running?" Something in him cracked. Just for a second, a shadow passed over his face, and when he spoke again, his voice was hollow. "Because I refused to choose violence over truth. My pack didn't agree." She swallowed hard, eyes on him. "So they turned on you." Ronan looked at her then, truly looked. "And now you've stumbled into the middle of it." Elena exhaled slowly, then turned to sit at the edge of the table. "Funny, I didn't realize a wrong turn could turn into a civil war." "You're not just a wrong turn," he said. She blinked. He stepped forward, slower this time. "I can smell it, Elena. There's something in you that doesn't belong to the human world." "Not completely." She stiffened. "I'm not like you." "No," he said carefully. "But you're not like them either." She shook her head. "No. That's not, that can't be." "Have you ever felt drawn to places you couldn't explain? Like something inside you pulled toward the woods? Or smelled something others couldn't? Heard whispers in the trees when no one else noticed?" She went still, because yes, she had. Even as a child, the forest had always felt alive to her, breathing, watching. And since she'd returned, since she'd touched Ronan, something deeper had stirred. Something she hadn't told anyone about. A dream, maybe. A memory. A wolf, staring at her from a snowy clearing, and glowing gold eyes that looked like his. "I need air," she muttered, pushing past him and stepping outside before the cabin could close in around her. The cold bit at her skin the moment she stepped onto the porch. Snow had started again, soft, delicate flakes floating down from a sky the color of ash. The forest stood still, like it was waiting, She leaned against the railing, trying to slow her breathing. None of this made sense. Or maybe it did. And that's what scared her. Elena Monroe, runaway daughter of a town she swore she'd never return to, now tangled up with a man who turned into a wolf, claimed he was marked by fate, and spoke of packs and blood like they were scripture. But the worst part, a tiny, traitorous voice inside her whispered that it felt real. Behind her, the door creaked open. She didn't turn. You think I'm crazy, Ronan said quietly. No, she admitted. I think I might be. A moment passed. Come back. Inside, he said. I'll tell you everything. No more half-truths. You deserve that. She turned to face him then, her eyes meeting his. Why me, Ronan? Why now? He hesitated. His voice was barely audible over the wind. Because I think the reason your life fell apart is the same reason mine did. Her breath caught. Because, in that moment, she understood. She hadn't just found a man in the woods. She'd found a connection neither of them could explain and neither of them could deny. Elena didn't know what compelled her to follow Ronan back inside the cabin, but she did. Maybe it was the cold, maybe curiosity, or maybe that aching, intangible thread between them that tugged tighter each time she tried to pull away. He had built a small fire again. The flames danced gently, casting soft amber light across the wood, walls and over his face, shadowing his jawline and illuminating the tension he tried to hide. She took a seat in the old armchair by the hearth. He didn't sit at first, just stood by the window, staring out as though expecting something to come crawling out of the trees at any moment. Talk, she said. Ronan looked over his shoulder. Where do you want me to start? You said you'd stop with the half-truths, she reminded him. So how about the beginning? He sighed. The kind of sigh that came from someone carrying years of weight. I was born into the Briarclaw pack, he began. One of the old bloodlines. We don't just protect territory, we carry lore, customs, ancient bonds, and responsibilities. Elena nodded once, eyes on him. I was marked as the next alpha before I could shift, he continued. But tradition says an alpha must prove himself to the pack and the moon. So I trained, fought, bled for it. Then, 3 years ago, I took the right. What's that? A sacred challenge. You enter the forest on the blood moon and you don't come back until you've earned your bond to the land, to the ancestors. And did you? I did. He touched the mark on his shoulder. That's when this appeared, burned in two, me by the moon's fire. Proof that I was chosen. Elena shifted in her seat, uncertain whether to be impressed or deeply disturbed. So what went wrong? She asked, his jaw clenched. My father, the former alpha, wanted to use the old ways to dominate the other packs. Conquest, not balance. He wanted me to bond with a chosen mate from one of the rival clans to solidify his rule. But I refused. Elena frowned. Why? His voice dropped. Because she wasn't mine. She felt that word mine like an electric pulse in the space between them. I tried to challenge him, Ronan said, looking down. Tried to take control before the pack could be dragged into war. But he ambushed me, with others, betrayed by blood. I barely got out. And now they're hunting you, she whispered, for disobedience, for survival. The fire popped. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then Elena's voice broke the quiet. You said I wasn't completely human. He nodded slowly. How? Do you know that? I can smell it. His voice was low, reverent almost. Your scent. It's layered. Like there's a bond inside you waiting to wake up. And something about you, your energy reacts to me. Like we're connected. Her skin prickled. I'm not a shifter, she said quickly. No, he agreed. But something in you answers to the old magic. She shook her head. This has to be a mistake. I was just trying to figure out who my father is. At that, Ronan finally turned away from the window. Your father? She nodded, retrieving the crumpled letter from her coat pocket. She handed it to him. He read it silently, lips pressed in a thin line. Find your father in Black Hollow. He's not what you think. Ronan's brows furrowed. Your mother was human? Yes. She raised me alone, never spoke of my father. She knew something, he murmured. Otherwise, she wouldn't have written this. So what are you saying? Elena asked, heart pounding. That my father's a werewolf? Maybe. Or someone touched by our world. She stared into the fire, her thoughts unraveling. How many times had she brushed off the strange dreams? The way she could sense moods in rooms before people even spoke. Or how animals always seemed to watch her a little too closely? It wasn't just superstition. And now, Ronan stood across from her like a storm-given flesh, eyes dark, voice low, and somehow she felt like she belonged in this madness. This is insane, she muttered. Maybe, Ronan said. But I'm still alive because of you. She looked up. You can do that? I can try, he said, but it won't last forever. Once awakened, a bloodline echoes. And if I stay? Killian swallowed. Then you'll need to learn who you really are. What it means to carry a legacy like yours. To fight, to shift. Her mouth went dry. To shift? He nodded. The wolf in you is beginning to stir. You felt it yesterday when I was fighting the heat in your blood. The way your body pulled toward mine? She flushed. I thought that was fear. It wasn't. She looked away, unsure what to do with the truth. I can teach you, Killian said, but I won't force you. You've already lost too much. She studied him again. His wounds were clotting now, his breath steadier, but he still looked haunted. Still looked like a man who carried a weight he couldn't drop. How? Do you live with the things you've done? She asked suddenly. He didn't flinch. I don't, he said. I carry them. Their eyes met in that moment. Something between them cracked open, not romance, not lust, but recognition. Two people torn from their lives, stitched together. By fate neither of them wanted, and yet, it fit. Impossibly, irrevocably. Amelia sat beside him again. Then teach me. He turned to her. Are you sure? No, she said. But I'm tired of running from ghosts. Killian gave the smallest smile. Then we begin at moonrise. Betrayal or sacrifice. The moon rose pale and round, veiled behind a curtain of fog. It hung above the treetops like an unblinking eye, watchful, ancient, waiting. Inside the fire shelter, Amelia stood barefoot on the cold stone floor, her skin slick with sweat, her heart thudding as though it were trying to break free from her chest. Killian stood behind her, silent, the weight of his presence like another layer of heat against her back. They had begun the ritual an hour ago, slow breathing, grounding, connecting to the pulse of the forest. Her blood hummed with energy. The wolf inside her had not yet risen, but it circled, curious, awake. She could feel it now, like another heartbeat beneath her skin. Her mind raced. What if she wasn't ready? What if she lost control, like the rogue had? What if Killian had lied about everything? No, he hadn't lied, but he hadn't told her everything either. She felt it, that slight hesitation in his eyes when she asked about the curse, the way he deflected when she mentioned Liam's final hours. Something was missing, some piece of the truth he refused to give her, and it clawed at her. You're tense, Killian said softly behind her. I'm trying. She whispered. You're resisting. I'm not. You are, he said. You're scared. Amelia turned to face him. Of course I'm scared. Everything I knew about my life is gone. My brother's dead. I'm apparently half wolf, and the one person who knows how to guide me through this has more secrets than scars. Killian's jaw tensed, but he didn't argue. She stepped back. What aren't you telling me? He hesitated. Just a moment, but it was enough. Her voice dropped. Don't lie to me, Killian. He looked at her, silver eyes burning in the dark. I'm not lying, he said, but there are things I can't say yet. Can't, or won't. He turned away. If I told you everything, it would break you. She stepped closer. That's not your choice to make. His hands clenched. It is when it's the only way to keep you alive. A long silence fell between them, thick and pulsing. The fire flickered low, casting their shadows against the wooden walls like ghosts. Amelia wrapped her arms around herself. You told me Liam died protecting me, but you never said how he died. What really happened? Killian exhaled, a sound of pure weariness. I told you enough. No, she said, voice sharp. You told me the parts that made you look noble. He turned then, eyes flashing. You want the truth? Fine. He died fighting me. The words landed like a slap. What? She breathed. Killian's face was unreadable. I didn't kill him, but we fought. He came after me when I refused to leave. You. He said I was a threat, that the bond would ruin you. Amelia staggered back a step. You fought my brother? I tried to reason with him. He wouldn't listen. We both shifted. The rogue found us mid-fight. It used our distraction. Her voice cracked. So you let him die? No, Killian said, eyes fierce. I held him as he bled out. I tried to save him. But you have no idea what it's like to feel your mate's scent pull at you while your friend lies dying in your arms. Tears blurred her vision. You should have told me. I wanted to, he said. But you weren't ready. And who gave you the right to decide that? I did, he said. Because I knew that if you hated me, you'd walk away. And the Pax would find you. You'd die before the full moon. Amelia stepped forward until she was chest to chest with him. And what makes you think I won't walk away now? His voice dropped. Because the bond is real. She hated how those words made her heart flutter. Hated how her blood thrummed in response. Because it was real. She felt it. And that made the betrayal worse. She turned away, blinking back tears. I trusted you. I know. You broke it. He didn't speak. She crossed the room, grabbed her boots, shoved them on. I need air. Killian watched her but didn't stop her. Don't go too far. She didn't answer. Amelia stepped out into the cold night, the forest stretching endlessly before her. Moonlight kissed the wet leaves, and her breath fogged in the crisp air. She walked aimlessly, fury and grief swirling in her gut. It wasn't just the truth he'd hidden, it was the choice he'd stolen. The right to grieve Liam without questions. The right to decide who to trust. Why had he held it back? Why had he let her bond with him knowing he carried the last moments of her brother's life like a secret? She stopped at the edge of a stream, the water whispering softly over smooth stones. Then she heard it, a sound behind her, a crack of twigs. Soft, intentional. She turned but there was nothing. Another movement. She backed up, heart thudding. Killian? She called. No answer. Then something lunged from the shadows. Amelia hit the ground hard. The wind knocked from her lungs. Claws grazed her side. She kicked wildly, fought to reach her blade, but it wasn't Killian who came crashing through the trees. It was a different wolf. Pale gray, scarred, with blood-crusted teeth and eyes full of hunger. A second rogue. She scrambled backward, panic surging. The beast stalked toward her, slow, savoring. Then another roar. Killian. He slammed into the rogue, this time fully shifted. His wolf form was enormous, jet black, eyes gleaming silver. The forest shook with their impact. Amelia crawled away, watching as they clashed, teeth and claws, blood and snarls. Killian fought like a creature possessed, not reckless, but feral, precise. His wolf was brutal, terrifying, but it was protecting her. When the rogue finally fell, broken and still, Killian shifted back slowly, panting, blood streaming down his chest. He didn't move toward her. He just stood there, eyes searching. Hers. I'm sorry, he said. I should have told you. She shook her head, still trembling. You didn't break the bond, but you broke something else. I'll earn it back, he said, voice low. If it takes everything I have. She said nothing, but she didn't walk away either. And that, for now, was enough. Emotional breakthrough. Famila didn't remember falling. She only remembered the blinding pain, the blood on her ribs, the sensation of falling through a curtain of fog and leaves and then darkness. By the time she opened her eyes again, she wasn't in the woods. She was warm, wrapped in blankets, the scent of cedar and smoke surrounding her. Her side throbbed with pain, but it wasn't sharp anymore. Someone had cleaned the wound, wrapped it. A fire crackled nearby, and then she heard it, low breathing, heavy, steady. She turned her head and saw Killian sitting at the foot of the bedroll, bare-chested, his arms crossed, silver eyes fixed on her with an intensity that bordered on agonized relief. You're awake, he said quietly. She tried to sit up. Pain lanced through her side. He was beside her in an instant, gently pressing a hand to her shoulder. Don't. You tore muscle. You were bleeding badly. What happened? Her voice was dry, cracked. You passed out. After the fight, you lost too much blood. I carried you back. Amelia looked around. They were in a different shelter, an old hunter's cabin tucked deep in the mountains, judging by the thick stone walls and aged timbers. It was larger than the other, better stocked, probably a former pack base. He sat back on his heels, watching her like she was made of glass. She hated the vulnerability in that. I told you not to follow me, she muttered. He said nothing. Amelia looked down at the bandage across her ribs. You stitched me. He nodded. 14 stitches. And I gave you a tincture to dull the pain. It's natural, won't knock you out, but you'll feel floaty for a while. She stared at him. Why do you know how to do all of this? Because I've been patching up people I couldn't save since I was 16, he said, voice flat. And I wasn't going to lose you. The words hung there. Amelia turned her face away, biting the inside of her cheek. Emotion burned hot behind her eyes. You should have let me go, she whispered. He looked at her, something unreadable in his face. No, you said you wouldn't force this. I'm not, he said. But I made a promise to your brother, and to myself. I don't run from the people I care about. You barely know me. I feel you, he said, almost too softly, in ways that make no sense. That hurt. And it's not about the bond, Amelia. Not entirely. I've felt it since the first time I saw you, before I even knew who you were. She blinked at him, stunned. You're saying you felt this before fate told you we were bonded? He nodded once. I fought it, he said. I avoided the ridge. I left offerings at the edge of your trail to redirect rogues. But it wasn't enough. I still ended up here. Still ended up in your path. And when I saw you, all I could think was, God's help me. I'd ruin myself if it meant keeping her safe. Amelia felt her chest tighten. A tear slid down her temple, but she said nothing. Killian's voice was quieter now. I've killed. I've bled. I've buried too many people to count. I thought I'd buried my heart with them. He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. But then I met a woman who looked at me like she could see through the wolf, and it terrified me more than anything. She closed her eyes, breathing shallow. I'm so tired, Killian, she whispered. I can't keep carrying this. Liam's gone. The world makes no sense. I don't know where I belong anymore. He moved slowly, gently taking her hand. His skin was calloused and warm, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in small, steady circles. You belong right here, he said. You always did. You just didn't know it. A long silence passed. The fire hissed. Wind groaned softly through the beams above. Finally, she whispered, I thought I hated you. I know, but when I thought I was going to die out there, all I wanted was to see your face again. Just once. Killian's breath caught. He leaned in slowly, until his forehead rested against hers. He was trembling, not from fear, from restraint. You still can walk away, he said hoarsely. This doesn't have to be fate. You can choose your own ending. She opened her eyes and met his. I don't want an ending, she said. I want the truth, and I want time. His jaw flexed, and for a moment he looked more wolf than man. Then I'll give you both. He pulled back slightly, letting her hand slip from his. The loss of his touch felt colder than the air. Rest, he said. You'll need your strength. There's more out there, more than just rogues. Words getting around. She frowned. About me? He nodded. Some say a lost bloodline has returned. Others say the Ashcliff Alpha has broken his curse. She blinked. You mean, you? His smile was bitter. They think you're my redemption. That your bond has tamed me. That I'm no longer a threat. Are they right? She asked. He looked at her for a long time. Then he whispered, I don't feel like a monster when I'm with you, but that doesn't mean I'm not one. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached out and touched the scar across his collarbone, the one that crossed his heart. Killian froze. How did you get this? She asked. His breath shuddered. My father gave it to me the night he died. Said, if I ever felt love, it would hurt. She traced the mark gently. Does it? He looked into her eyes. Yes. And still, he didn't move away. Amelia leaned back against the bedroll, her head swimming, the fire warming her chilled skin. In the flicker of silence, they both knew nothing had been fixed, but something had changed. The walls between them, so high, so thick, had cracked, and through the fractures, something raw and powerful had begun to bloom. Not just instinct, not just fate, but trust. Love reveled. The fire had burned down to amber coals by the time Amelia stirred. She hadn't meant to fall asleep, especially not beside Killian. But the pain in her ribs had dulled to a whisper, and the warmth of the cabin, the rhythm of the storm outside, and the unspoken truce between them had wrapped around her like a balm. The kind of safety she hadn't felt since before Liam died. Killian was seated by the far wall now, shirt back on, damp from where he'd washed the blood off his arms. The tension in his body had eased, but his eyes were distant, watching the fire, yet somewhere else entirely. He didn't look up when he said, I thought I'd lost you again. Amelia blinked, still half in dreams. Again? He leaned his head back against the log wall. When you collapsed, it reminded me of the first time I almost lost control. When I was younger, maybe 17, my pack was ambushed. I survived, but my best friend didn't. And I was too frozen, too broken to save her. I've never forgiven myself for that. She sat up slowly, adjusting the blanket around her shoulders. You froze? He nodded. My wolf was fighting me. I wanted to shift to protect her, but the curse, if I shifted fully, I'd lose myself. I didn't take the risk. I watched her bleed out in my arms. Amelia's chest ached. And you think that makes you weak? No, he said, eyes flicking to hers. It makes me afraid. She watched him carefully, the honesty in his voice surprising her. This bond, she said after a pause, has it ever felt like a trap to you? His brows furrowed. At first, yes, me too, she admitted. I didn't want to feel anything for you. I hated that my body responded before my mind could decide anything. It felt like betrayal. Of Liam, of myself, he nodded, not interrupting. But now, she continued softly, I wonder if fate chose us not because we were perfect for each other, but because we were broken in the same way. Killian's gaze sharpened. I thought love had to be instant, overwhelming, she said. But this has been slower. It hurts sometimes. And yet, every time I look at you, I see someone trying not to become the thing the world expects him to be. A long silence followed. The words hung in the air between them, trembling with weight. Killian rose and crossed the room slowly. He knelt before her, his movements careful. He didn't reach for her, didn't touch. I've waited for a moment where you saw me, not the monster, not the shifter, not the one who failed Liam, but just me. I see you, she said, voice raw, his breath caught. And if you walked away, Amelia, I'd let you. I wouldn't fight the bond, but God's help me, I would want you every second of every day until I took my last breath. Tears welled in her eyes. I'm not walking away, she whispered. He searched her face for doubt, for hesitation. But there was none, and then slowly, he lifted his hand and brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. His fingers lingered, tracing the curve of her jaw like he was committing it to memory. Their lips met not in hunger, but in reverence, soft, searching. When they broke apart, her breath shivered in her throat. I've never felt like I belonged to anything, she said. Not even myself. You do now, he whispered. You belong with me, but more than that, you belong to yourself. I'm just part of your story, not the whole of it. She smiled, small, but real. Then she touched her palm to his chest, over his heart. And you? Do you still feel cursed? He placed his hand over hers. No, he said, not anymore. They sat there, breathing each other in, the fire casting golden light across their faces. The storm outside had faded, replaced by wind that whispered through the trees like a lullaby. After a long moment, Killian spoke again. Do you feel it? Amelia tilted her head. What? The bond? Now that it's not fighting us anymore. Now that we've accepted it. She closed her eyes and focused. There it was, low and deep in her chest. A second heartbeat. Not her own. A pull that wasn't just physical, but soul deep. Warmth flooded her limbs. Her breathing synced with his. Her pulse slowed. She opened her eyes. Yes. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead to hers. Then you'll never be alone again. Tears traced silently down her cheeks. It wasn't the fate she had wanted, but for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel like she was drowning. For the first time, she wanted to stay with him, not because the bond told her to, but because she chose to, and that made all the difference. Final Shalenge's scent of foreign wolves came on the wind just before midnight. Killian's head snapped up from the maps spread across the table. Amelia was seated beside him, reading one of Liam's old journals when she felt it too, a ripple of dread, sharp and acidic, like iron in her mouth. They're close, Killian murmured. She stood, every muscle in her body suddenly alert. Who? The Abanfangs, he said, voice low. A northern pack. They've ruled the mountain borders for centuries. Strict, brutal, but organized. I knew they'd come. Amelia stepped closer. Because of me. He met her eyes. Because of us. A deep, distant howl echoed across the forest, long, guttural, and commanding. The air grew still. Even the trees seemed to brace themselves. Amelia's heart pounded. What do they want? Killian turned toward the door. To test the bond. To judge its legitimacy. To decide whether I've broken ancient law. She stared at him. What law? In Ashcliff lore, he explained, if a cursed alpha mates without council approval, especially to a bloodline previously believed extinct, it can be seen as a provocation, a challenge to the order. And what happens if they don't approve? Killian's expression was grave. They'll demand I sever the bond, or submit. Submit how? He didn't answer, but he didn't have to. Amelia stepped in front of him. You're not facing this alone. No, he said. You don't need to be part of this. I do, she said. Because if I keep letting people fight for me instead of with me, I'll never stop being a passenger in my own life. A flash of pride flickered in his eyes. Then fear. They're not just political wolves, Amelia. They're enforcers of the old code. Ruthless. Then they've never met me. He let out a shaky breath. Liam would have hated this, but he would have respected me for standing my ground, she said. And so will they. Outside, movement stirred the trees. Twigs snapped. Gravel crunched under heavy feet. Killian reached for his blade and stepped out onto the porch, Amelia just behind him. 5 wolves emerged from the trees, 3 in human form, 2 in beast. All were tall, lean, clad in black leather and bone tokens. Their leader stood in the center, a man in his 40s with iron-gray hair, yellow eyes, and a gaze that stripped everything bare. Killian Vaughn, the man said. Killian nodded. Alpha, Calder, you called no council. You marked no territory. And you took a mate who belongs to no pack, Calder said, voice like thunder. You've broken blood order. She broke no laws, Killian said. She didn't even know who she was until 2 weeks ago. Blood speaks louder than ignorance, Calder said. Then his gaze slid to Amelia. You, step forward. Killian moved between them. She doesn't answer to you. I'll do it, Amelia said, gently pushing past Killian. Let me speak. Calder looked her over slowly, like a predator assessing threat. Your scent carries night reach, but it's old, distant. You're untrained, undeclared, and not yours to command, she said. A whisper passed through the others. You accept the bond to the Ashcliff Alpha? Calder asked. I chose it, she said, even before I understood it. And what would you do to defend it? Amelia squared her shoulders. Whatever it takes. Calder studied her for a long moment. Then he turned back to Killian. We should kill you, or strip your title and claim your land. That's the law. Then do it, Killian growled, stepping forward. But know this, if you try to touch her, I will end you. Pack law be damned. Before Calder could respond, one of the wolves in beast form lunged. Amelia didn't think. She moved. The wolf slammed into her, but she twisted, ducked under it, and plunged the blade Killian had given her earlier into its exposed flank. The beast howled in pain and rolled. Blood stained her hands, but she stood tall. I'm not just some relic, she shouted. I'm not a symbol. I'm not a prize. I'm the last of a line you thought you erased. And if you want to challenge me, then you'll find out just how much of my blood is still wild. The forest fell silent. Killian stared at her like he'd never seen her before. Calder's lips curled into something like a smile. So, he said, the she-wolf rises. He motioned, and the injured beast shifted back into human form, snarling in pain. We'll leave, Calder said, for now. But your bond has made ripples. Bigger packs will come, stronger enemies. Choose your allies carefully. Killian Vaughn. He turned and disappeared into the woods, the others following without a word. Silence lingered. Amelia trembled, adrenaline crashing. Killian caught her before she fell. You didn't have to do that, he murmured. Yes, I did, she said. I couldn't let them reduce me to a name in a bloodline book. He brushed a bloody strand of hair from her face. You were magnificent. She gave a soft laugh. You sound surprised. I'm not, he said. I'm just grateful. He wrapped his arms around her. She leaned into him, heart still pounding, body still buzzing with fear and fire. They stood like that until the wind died and the moon slid behind the clouds again. She looked up. So what now? Killian met her gaze. Now, we prepare. We find the others. We protect this place. Our place. She nodded. Together, he smiled, the first full smile she'd seen from him. Always, and beneath that ancient sky, they chose each other again, not because fate demanded it, but because love had risen from the ashes of blood, grief, and war. This was not the end. This was the beginning. Resolution. The forest was quieter after the confrontation. Not silent, never silent, but calm, like the trees themselves had exhaled. The tension that had sat like smoke over the mountain had lifted. The threat had passed for now, and in its wake, something else had taken root. Stillness, acceptance. Amelia stood near the edge of the cliff, overlooking the wide valley below. Dawn touched the hills with pale gold. The river far below shimmered like spilled silver. She breathed deeply, the air crisp and wild, carrying no scent of fear, just pine, moss, and Killian. He was behind her, silent, watchful. She felt him the way one feels the sun, constant, warm, even when not looking directly at it. You've been quiet, he said softly. She nodded, not turning. I needed to listen, to everything, to the trees, to the earth, to myself. And he asked, I don't want to run anymore, she said. I spent my whole life afraid of things I couldn't name. Now that I know what they are, I'm not afraid, just ready. Killian stepped beside her. His profile was lined with morning light, strong jaw, those ever-watchful silver eyes, a faint scar just under his cheekbone she hadn't noticed before. "You're not the same woman who came back to this town," he said. "No," she agreed. "I buried her with Liam." They stood in silence for a while, letting the breeze pass between them. Finally, Amelia turned to face him. "I want to rebuild the cabin." He blinked. "Your old family cabin?" She nodded. "Liam's place. Our place. It was always more than wood and stone. It was safety. If I'm going to stay, if I'm going to fight for something, it should start there." Killian smiled slowly. "Then I'll help." They made their way down the path, the morning light chasing shadows as they moved. Back at the ruin, Amelia stood before what remained of the cabin that had once been home. The stone foundation still held. The steps leading up to the porch were cracked but intact. The front door had been torn clean off during the rogue attack, but its hinges still creaked when she touched them. "We could build it stronger," Killian said. "Stone walls, reinforced timber, a hearth in every room, and windows everywhere," she added. "So I don't feel like I'm hiding anymore." Killian tilted his head, admiring her. "What?" He stepped closer. "You talk like an alpha now." She raised a brow. "Is that a compliment or a warning?" He smiled. "Both." Amelia laughed, truly laughed for the first time in weeks. It surprised them both. Later, they gathered supplies from a nearby shelter Killian had claimed as his personal store. Tools, stone, spare planks. He taught her how to reinforce the foundation, how to stack the logs with precision. She surprised him with how quickly she learned. By evening, they'd rebuilt the skeleton of the front wall. Dusty and exhausted, they sat on the porch steps as the sun slipped behind the trees. "This is how it should have been," she said softly. "Not blood and death, not curses and secrets. Just peace." "It still can be," Killian said. "It won't be easy, but nothing good ever is." She looked at him. "Do you ever wish the bond hadn't chosen us?" He considered that a long moment. Then, "I used to. And now I'm glad it did. Because I never would have let myself want this. I never thought I deserved it. But fate did." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "I'm tired of fighting fate." "Then don't," he said. "Make it fight for you." They sat like that until the stars began to appear one by one, like old memories returning. That night, she dreamed of her mother, a woman made of moonlight, with eyes like frost and a voice like wind in the trees. In the dream, her mother reached out and pressed a hand to Amelia's heart. "You are both wolf and fire," she whispered. "Neither will ever destroy the other. Learn to burn gently." When Amelia woke, she felt different, not changed but whole. As if something inside her had finally settled. The next morning, she and Killian stood before a small pool deep in the woods, a sacred place among shifters, where bloodlines were named, where oaths were sealed. He offered her a blade. "For what?" she asked. "You speak your name, your choice. Not your bloodline, not mine, yours." She took the blade, sliced her palm, and let the blood fall into the water. "I am Amelia Reed," she said clearly. "Daughter of Moonblood, sister to Liam, of the Lost Line, mate to Killian Vaughn. Not claimed, not cursed, chosen." The water shimmered with silver light. Killian stepped forward, slicing his palm. "I am Killian of Ashcliff, cursed no more, bound by fate but anchored by choice. Protector, mate, alpha." The forest stirred. A wind rushed through the trees, and a long howl echoed in the distance, neither threatening nor mournful, but full of something else, blessing. When they returned to the cabin that evening, they found a small bundle waiting on the porch: furs, dried herbs, a carved token with the Ebenfang sigil. Amelia raised an eyebrow. "A gift?" Killian picked up the token. "A sign. They've accepted our bond, for now. And the others? They'll watch, they'll wait, but they won't come here yet." She nodded. "Then we build, and we prepare." He grinned. "Side by side, always," she said. As they worked, her hand brushed his, and for a heartbeat, everything stilled, not because of the bond, not because of fate, but because for the first time in either of their lives, they had something worth fighting for. Together, where the forest in spring arrived quietly in deep hollow, the snow melted into the earth, leaving the forest smelling of new things: wet moss, unfurling leaves, promise. Wildflowers bloomed across the hills in hesitant bursts, purple and yellow and white. The river ran stronger now, fed by thaw and time, and at the edge of it all, a cabin stood restored with patient hands and guarded by a man who once thought himself cursed. Inside, Amelia moved through the kitchen barefoot, her hair tied loosely at her neck, her hands dusted with flour. The windows were open, birds sang. The air was cool, fragrant with pine and the faintest trace of ash from the morning hearth. Behind her, Killian leaned against the doorframe, watching her as he always did, like he hadn't yet figured out how to believe this was real. She turned, caught him staring. "You're doing it again," he smirked. "Doing what?" "Looking at me like I'm going to disappear." He walked toward her slowly, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Can you blame me?" She leaned into him, resting her head on his chest. "It's been 3 months, Killian, and every one of them feels borrowed," he said. "Like the forest hasn't decided yet whether it'll keep you." She pulled back to look up at him. "I didn't choose the forest." He raised a brow. "No, I chose you." He smiled then, slow and deep. The kind of smile that made her heart flutter. "Even now, you know," he said, brushing a loose strand of hair from her cheek, "you're not the woman who came back here looking for answers." She tilted her head. "No?" He shook his head. "That woman was running. And who am I now? You're rooted. You're firewood and home and moonlight. You belong to the forest now. And to yourself." Her throat tightened. "And to you." He kissed her then, slow and unhurried, like the world could wait a little longer. When they pulled apart, she let out a breath. "You still owe me the rest of the story." He blinked. "What story?" "The shifter lore. You gave me pieces. I want the whole thing." Killian chuckled and walked toward the hearth. He grabbed a small book bound in dark leather from a high shelf. "This was written by the first Ashcliff Alpha centuries ago. It's not just lore, it's memory, truth passed down in blood and bone." He sat on the sofa, beckoning her to join him. She curled beside him, legs tucked under her. He opened the book. His voice deepened. "Before the packs, before the forests were carved by roads, the shifters were guardians, not of land, but of balance. Each bloodline held a role. Ashcliff bore the burden of rage. Nightreach carried vision. Hollowfang controlled change. Others came and went, but those 3 anchored the wild." She nodded. "I carry Nightreach. And me, Ashcliff," he said. "Which means our bond isn't just fate, it's restoration. It's the forest remembering itself." Amelia traced the edge of the page. "But the curse." Killian nodded. "My bloodline twisted its purpose. We turned rage inward, became something feared. The curse was born of a broken oath, and Ashcliff Alpha took a mate by force. The forest punished the line, and it healed when we chose each other freely." "Exactly." She looked up at him. "So, we're not just bonded, we're mending something ancient." He met her gaze. "You're not just my mate, Amelia. You're my balance." She pressed her palm to his chest. "And you're mine." Silence fell, deep and warm. Eventually, Killian closed the book and set it aside. "Others will come," he said. "More packs. Some curious, some afraid." She nodded. "And we'll be ready." They stood then, moving outside into the soft gold of morning. The porch creaked under their bare feet. Across the clearing, a doe grazed in the tall grass, unbothered by their presence. "Do you ever miss your old life?" he asked. Amelia shook her head. "I didn't have a life. I had grief dressed up as routine. Here, I breathe, I build, I feel." He took her hand. "You'll always have a choice. If you want to leave one day." She stopped him with a kiss. "I'm not leaving," she whispered. "The forest may have called me, but love made me stay." He exhaled, closing his eyes. The wind stirred the trees, and then, from the edge of the forest, a wolf appeared. Lean, gray-furred, cautious. Amelia didn't move. The wolf watched them for a long time, then bowed its head, not in submission, in respect. Another followed, then a third. A chorus of howls rose in the distance, not of war, but of welcome. Killian stiffened. "They're here." Amelia squeezed his hand. "So let them come." He smiled down at her, and together, they stepped off the porch into the wild, into the future, into something both ancient and entirely new. And the forest, old as time, whispered its blessing in the rustling leaves. Home.